Hello, Bolida, salut. My name is Gloria, and today I'm excited to be presenting my dissertation research on simulated digital shared eating on university students, mental health, and loneliness, or Screenside meals in short. By the end of this video presentation, you should have a clear idea of why digital mealtime habits are important to university students and perhaps the wider population, what my study is about and what was found, and equally what that then might mean for the counseling world or counseling practice. Before I dive in, I do want to note that I encourage you to pause this video at any point because there are some elements on the slides that I do not get into detail due to the time limit. That being said, let me do a quick self-introduction. My name is Gloria, as previously mentioned, and I am a current Master's in Counseling student at Bangor University here in Wales. I previously studied at Newcastle University for my undergraduate degree, doing a joint honours in psychology and nutrition. So it doesn't come as a surprise that I have an interest in food and food-related things. And for a while, I have been interested in how food shapes our emotions, identities, and relationships. A lot of my interests center around how cultural messages about food and bodies can influence mental health, including body image concerns and eating disorders. My previous dissertation explored breastfeeding attitudes among Black and African mothers, which may have made me more curious about how lived experiences and cultural contexts interact with psychological well-being. That brings me to the focus of today's research. Eating is one of the most universal behaviors that we share as humans and is deeply shaped by our cultures. We know that food environments can influence mood, identity, and even mental health. So, it is reasonable to ask whether our digital environments around food might do the same. At the same time, loneliness among students, in particular, is rising, and many of us now eat with screens for company, including myself. Technology often gets framed as harmful, but it can also be used intentionally to support connection. This overlap between food, loneliness, culture, and digital habits is exactly where my study sits. So with that context in mind, let's look at what I explored. Today I'll start by briefly explaining what exactly digital commensality is and why it matters for student well-being in my introduction. I'll then outline the specific question my study aimed to answer, followed by a simple walkthrough of the methodology to show how the study was designed and what participants actually did. From there, I'll show the main findings, both the quantitative results and the themes that came out of the qualitative comments. And finally, we'll look at what these findings mean for the student population, for well-being, and for counseling practice, before ending with a clear take-home message. You've seen the word commensality in my title, and I've said it a few times now, but what does it mean? It is as simple as sharing a meal or having a shared eating experience with someone else. It is strongly linked to mood, belonging, and social connection, and is widely recognized as a meaningful cultural practice. However, loneliness is particularly high among university students, as I previously mentioned, making everyday relational experiences especially relevant to this group. At the same time, digital habits are changing eating context, with many students now regularly eating alone while using screens. Some digital formats can create a sense of social presence, but many common examples are performative. For example, mukbangs, where people often eat large amounts of food, and these are not reflective of everyday eating. Despite these changes, there is still limited controlled research on passive, everyday digital commensality in young adults, particularly in relation to loneliness and well-being. This matters because food-related behavior, loneliness, and digital media use are increasingly overlapping in daily life. This study therefore explores whether simulated digital commensality can influence mood and loneliness in university students compared with a control condition. It was hypothesized that participants in the digital commensality condition would show greater improvement in positive effect, negative effect, and loneliness. In addition, the qualitative aim was exploratory, focusing on participants' subjective experiences of connection, comfort, and engagement during the task. I used a mixed design with one between subject factor and one within subject factor, and collected both quantitative and qualitative data. Please feel free to pause on this slide because I'll go into more detail in the next slides. The online study hosted on SiteLocate was available to participants via any advertising platform they were exposed to. The study and its aims were explained, and then they provided informed consent. Participants then completed baseline measures of mood and loneliness with the measures shown on the screen, before being randomly assigned to one of the two video conditions during which they completed a short eating task. The eating task was them having their meal while watching the person in the video to simulate sharing a meal with the person in the video. Participants then completed the same measures post-task immediately afterwards, followed by a set of open-ended questions about their experience. Ethically, the study was approved by Bangor University's Ethics Committee, and research was conducted according to ethical standards. For example, informed consent, the right to withdraw, and anonymity were all upheld. 2 videos were created for this study, as you can see at the bottom of the screen. Both feature the same individual as the video contributor, that person being me, as you can see on the slide, in the same setting, framing, and controlled duration to ensure comparability. None of the videos included dialogue or interaction, allowing the study to isolate the presence versus absence of eating-related social cues. I also want to note that none of these videos are available to the public at the moment. A total of 125 participants were recruited, with 96 complete datasets included in the final analysis after screening. Participants were all university students, with a mean age in the mid-20s and a majority identifying as women. Most participants reported regularly consuming media while eating, specifically via video-based platforms like YouTube. Across both conditions, there were small but significant changes over time in affect and loneliness, as you can see in figures 1, 2, and 3 here. However, there was no significant difference between digital commensality and control conditions. This indicates that emotional changes were not specific to the experimental manipulation. Qualitative findings showed mixed and ambivalent experiences through the 5 themes shown on the screen. Some participants reported calmness or relaxation, while others described boredom, awkwardness, or self-consciousness. Quotes like, "It felt peaceful at times, but also a bit awkward, like something was missing," and "I expected to feel less alone, but without interaction I didn't feel social," shows participants perceived something was lacking, though many were unable to explain further. A key theme here was the absence of interaction, with many participants emphasizing that the experience did not feel socially reciprocal. However, it was noted by many participants that they could see the usefulness of this experience if they were lonely. And now to the discussion part of my dissertation. This slide summarizes the differences between the hypothesis and the actual findings. And as you can see, not all the hypotheses were fully supported. There were no condition differences, but the qualitative data did give us a lot more detail. When we bring together the quantitative and qualitative findings, a clearer picture emerges. The decreases in negative affect and loneliness likely reflect a general emotional settling rather than an effect of digital commensality itself. Low stimulation, routine eating tasks may help reduce cognitive and emotional overstimulation by focusing attention on the immediate activity, which aligns with work or media-paired eating. However, several factors may have prevented the eating video from producing stronger social benefits. One example is novelty and mismatch with participants' typical media habits. Students often consume fast-paced, stimulating, or entertaining content while eating, so the slower and silent format used here may have reduced immersion and comfort consistent with media engagement research. More importantly, the video lacked the key mechanisms associated with commensality, including interaction, reciprocity, responsiveness, and shared social cues. As a result, the digital practice may have not translated into meaningful social presence. There were also limited parasocial cues. The person in the video did not speak or express personality or interact with the viewer, meaning participants had little opportunity to form a sense of social connection or attachment. These findings have several implications for counseling and student well-being. First, eating alone, even with digital accompaniment, may still support short-term emotional regulation. This then suggests that routine eating contexts can act as brief grounding moments. Second, social presence appears to depend on interaction rather than passive co-presence, in this instance anyways. This highlights the importance of relational engagement in understanding digital well-being. From a counseling perspective, this may support reflection on eating environments, media use during meals, and also emotional awareness. There is also a tentative exploratory implication for social anxiety and avoidance, where structured digital context may help understand gradual engagement with social or eating-related situations. Overall, the findings suggest that emotional changes observed in this study were not driven by simulated social connection, but rather by the structure of the eating task itself, and maybe even elements of the food like taste and smell. In other words, what participants experience appears to be more closely linked to the act of taking time to eat in a controlled, focused context, rather than anything specifically therapeutic about the video stimulus. Across both conditions, participants were engaging in a relatively quiet, low stimulation activity while eating, which may have created a kind of emotional settling effect. This would help explain why we saw small changes in affect and loneliness over time, or this of short time, but no meaningful differences between the conditions. Bringing back the lack of interaction is needed here because it appears to be significant to this discussion, as it suggests that this digital commensality may not simply be about seeing another person eat or sharing time in a parallel activity. Instead, it depends on mutual or perceived mutual awareness and interaction between people. This study also had several limitations which should be considered when interpreting the findings. First, the intervention involved only a short one-time exposure. Feelings of loneliness and social connection are often shaped over time, so a brief eating task may not have been sufficient to produce meaningful effects. Second, the video format was highly controlled and intentionally minimal, but these might have also reduced ecological validity. Real-world digital eating experiences are usually more interactive, personalized, and socially dynamic than the silent, passive format used in this study. This study also relied entirely on self-report measures, which may be influenced by social desirability, self-awareness, or demand characteristics. Some participants appeared highly conscious of the unusual nature of the task, which may itself have affected their emotional responses. Future research could therefore explore forms of digital commensality that better reflect participants' typical media habits, including more familiar, engaging, or audiovisual context. Studies could also examine whether different personalities, speaking styles, or familiar figures strengthen parasocial engagement. It should also be noted that there may be a need to emphasize the meaning of the task and focus its psychoeducation to people who are currently feeling lonely, as reflected by the participants' reflections. In addition, future work could compare passive viewing with more interactive or concurrent sharing eating environments, such as live or real-time digital commensality. Though my results seem to not have been significant, there is still value in further exploring the routine, self-soothing behavior that eating and sharing a meal is. This is in part illustrated in Figure 4 here, on how routine eating influences emotional regulation, while social connection only emerges when interaction and reciprocity are present. To end, the take-home message is: routine acts, like eating, offer an accessible way to explore emotional experience and relational processes, which may be valuable for supporting reflection within counseling contexts. Thank you for your time. The following slide contains the references please feel free to pause to have a read. I also want to add that I welcome any questions, inquiries, follow-ups, opinions, especially if you have any insight that you'd like to share, or if you have any expertise in this domain. If you also like a longer reference list that I have used for my dissertation, please feel free to reach out to me. I have provided my email, my university email here on this slide, and also my LinkedIn URL.